Three of history's greatest empires, three different eras, three completely different monetary systems. And yet, they all made the same fatal mistake about money. Rome debased its coins, China invented paper currency, Britain clung to the gold standard. On the surface, these seem like entirely different problems, but dig deeper and you'll find they all fell into the same trap, a trap that still catches governments today. Let's start with Rome, the Roman debasement disaster. Picture this. It's 60 AD and you're holding a Roman denarius. It's a beautiful silver coin, 95% pure, weighing about 4 grams. This coin represents a day's wages for a skilled craftsman. The empire is at its height, controlling 1.5 million square miles and up to 130 million people. But Emperor Nero has a problem. Wars are expensive. Rebuilding Rome after the Great Fire of 64 AD is expensive, and Rome can only mint as many coins as it has silver and gold. So Nero comes up with what seems like a brilliant solution. Mix in cheaper metals, add some copper to the silver, reduce the purity to 90%. Now you can make more coins with the same amount of precious metal. Genius, right? Wrong. By the time of Marcus Aurelius, around 161 to 180 AD, the denarius contained only 75% silver. By the reign of Gellius in the 200s, coins contained barely 5% silver. What had been real money became little more than copper with a silver coating. And here's what happened to prices. From 150 to 300 AD, the price of 1 modius of wheat increased from 2 sesterces to 400 sesterces. That's a 200-fold increase in just a century and a half. Soldiers noticed their wages bought less and less. The pay of a Roman soldier increased from 900 sestertii per year under Augustus to 2,000 sestertii per year under Septimius Severus, yet they were actually poorer than before. The Emperor Caracalla supposedly said, "Nobody should have any money but I, so that I may bestow it upon the soldiers." The Roman emperors kept debasing the currency to pay their bills. And every time they did, prices rose further. People lost faith in the money. The middle and lower classes saw their purchasing power evaporate. Emperor Diocletian, taking power near the end of the 3rd century, was so desperate that in 301 AD he issued an edict establishing empire-wide price caps on around 1,200 items. But you can't legislate away inflation. The price controls just created black markets, making everything worse. By 268, there was only 0.5% silver left in the denarius, and prices in most parts of the empire rose by nearly 1,000%. The empire survived, but freedom didn't. The government, finding that recipients immediately spent debased coins before prices adjusted, began demanding taxes be paid in goods and services rather than in coin. They essentially repudiated their own currency. Citizens were trapped in hereditary occupations. The economy shrank. And eventually, some Romans welcomed barbarian invaders as liberators from their own kleptocratic state. Now let's jump forward about 900 years to China. China's paper money experiment. The Song dynasty, ruling from 960 to 1279, faced a different problem than Rome. They were minting billions of bronze coins, but the coins were heavy and inconvenient for large transactions. Around 1010, merchants in Sichuan came up with an innovative solution: deposit certificates. You'd deposit your heavy coins and get a paper note you could trade. It was convenient. It worked. The government noticed and thought, why let private merchants control this? In 1023, they nationalized paper money production, creating the jiaozi. For a while, it worked brilliantly. China had invented the world's first true paper currency, 6 centuries before Europe would follow. Marco Polo, visiting China later, marveled at how paper made from tree bark functioned as money across the vast empire. But then, the Song government discovered something seductive. These notes caused inflation as the government didn't back their paper money up with sufficient coins. Unlike Roman coins, which at least contained some precious metal, paper money has no intrinsic value. It's just paper. Its value exists only because people trust it. And here's where the Song made their fatal error. There were an estimated 650 million strings on the market in 1246, leading to extreme devaluation of the huizi and eventually runaway inflation. The government kept printing to finance wars with their northern neighbors and to maintain their armies. In 1204, an additional 5,300,000 min in banknotes were issued, at which point between 400 and as low as 100 cash coins were accepted per 1 min of paper currency, with a face value of 1,000 coins cash. Think about that. Paper money that was supposed to represent 1,000 coins could only buy you 100 actual coins, if you were lucky. The Song paper currency collapsed in 1264, and the dynasty itself was wiped out just 15 years later. The pattern repeated under the Yuan dynasty established by Kublai Khan. He introduced a silver-backed paper currency that initially worked well, but facing enormous military expenses, wars to unify China, invasions of Japan and Southeast Asia, the Mongols printed more and more paper money. The value of paper money depreciated by a whopping 1,000% by 1309. In 1276, just 16 years after implementing the silver standard, the yuan's paper money became nominally convertible, and it became inconvertible in 1310. The link to precious metal was severed. It became pure fiat currency, money backed by nothing but government decree. And what happened? The same story: massive inflation, loss of trust. Eventually, people refused paper money entirely and returned to barter. The Ming dynasty that followed tried paper money again in 1368, but it experienced rapid inflation and issues were suspended in 1450. China had invented paper money, and through painful experience, they learned that unlimited printing leads to unlimited inflation. Now, let's jump to Britain in the 1920s. Britain's gold standard straitjacket. Britain returned to the gold standard in 1925, but this time they made a different kind of mistake, not printing too much money, but being unable to print enough. After World War I, Britain faced a choice. The pound had depreciated during the war from about $4.86 to around $3.50. The sensible thing would have been to return to gold at this new, realistic rate. Instead, on April 28, 1925, Churchill announced the return to the gold standard at the pre-war rate of $4.86. Why? National prestige, the desire to maintain London as the world's financial center. This was a disaster. The economist John Maynard Keynes warned Churchill that returning to gold at the old parity would result in unemployment, downward adjustment of wages, prolonged strikes in heavy industries, and permanent contraction of these industries. Keynes was right. Churchill's policy of improving the exchange by 10% was a policy of reducing everyone's wages by 2 shillings in the pound. British exports became uncompetitive. Industries struggled. Unemployment soared. The gold standard created an iron cage. Monetary policy constraints meant interest rates were used to protect the exchange rate parity rather than to support the domestic economy. When the Great Depression hit, Britain could not lower interest rates to stimulate growth because doing so would cause gold to flow out of the country. In 1931, the government raised interest rates in a forlorn attempt to maintain the value of sterling, particularly harming interest-sensitive sectors like construction. As unemployment rose and tax revenues fell, the government faced pressure to balance its budget, which meant cutting spending exactly when spending was needed most. Finally, on September 19, 1931, speculative attacks on the pound led the Bank of England to abandon the gold standard. The government tried desperately to hold the line, borrowing £50 million from American and French central banks, but these loans were insufficient and exhausted in a matter of weeks due to large gold outflows. And then something unexpected happened. The ostensibly temporary departure from the gold standard had unexpectedly positive effects on the economy, leading to greater acceptance of departing from the gold standard. Britain could finally use monetary policy to stimulate the economy. Recovery began. Countries that withdrew from the gold standard, particularly those that left early, had superior economic performance compared to those that remained committed to gold. The pattern. So what's the connection? What did Rome, China, and Britain all get wrong? They all forgot the fundamental truth about money. Money is a measuring stick for value, not value itself. Rome treated money as something they could manipulate at will. They thought making more coins would make them richer. But diluting your currency is like changing the length of an inch. It doesn't actually create more wealth, it just makes the ruler unreliable. People adjusted prices upward to compensate. The emperor could print all the debased coins he wanted, but he couldn't print real prosperity. China made the same error in reverse. Paper money untethered from anything real became whatever the government said it was. And when the government said too many pieces of paper were worth too much, people eventually just stopped believing them. You can declare that paper is money, but you can't force people to value it once trust is lost. Britain made the opposite mistake. They treated gold as magical, as if the value of the pound came from yellow metal rather than from Britain's productive economy. They strangled their own economy trying to maintain an arbitrary ratio between paper and gold, sacrificing real employment and real production for monetary prestige. 3 empires, 3 errors. 1 lesson. Rome debased its currency and inflation destroyed economic stability. China printed paper money without restraint and inflation destroyed trust. Britain locked itself to an overvalued gold standard and couldn't respond to economic crisis. The modern echo. And here's the uncomfortable truth. We're still making these mistakes. When central banks create trillions in new currency through quantitative easing, are they really so different from Roman emperors mixing copper into silver? When governments print money to finance deficits, are they not walking the same path as the Song dynasty? And when policymakers rigidly pursue monetary targets, regardless of real-world consequences, are they not trapped in Britain's golden cage? The debasement of Roman currency can be tracked through metal composition, showing a pattern strikingly similar to modern central bank balance sheets when the charts are compared. The rate of decay is what's most astounding. Rome took centuries to destroy its currency. Modern governments can do it in decades. The lesson from 3 empires across 2 millennia is clear. Money is not wealth. It's a tool for measuring and exchanging wealth. Manipulate the tool too much, whether by debasement, unlimited printing, or rigid inflexibility, and you destroy its ability to function. Sound money doesn't require perfect stability. It requires something more fundamental: trust. Trust that the ruler won't change. Trust that promises will be kept. Trust that value today will translate to value tomorrow. Rome lost that trust through debasement. China lost it through overprinting. Britain nearly lost it through rigidity. The empires fell or stumbled not because they ran out of money, but because their money stopped meaning anything. That's what Rome, China, and Britain all got wrong about money. And the question is, are we making the same mistakes today?